5, 7, 1, 2, 3.
Hi, this is Pods and Ends, the junk drawer of pop culture and geek podcasts.
Welcome, one and all, to Pods and Ends. Even though there's no Phil and Soph this week,
We're still Pods and Ends.
They're too good for us.
That's true.
But in their absence, we have brought on an old friend to the pod and a certified comic book genius.
Certified. Stamp and all.
Yep, he's got the documents to prove it.
I appreciate you bringing that up because not often do people reference my certification, and I worked hard for that. So thank you.
You're welcome. So if you don't know, this is Michael Miller, my comic relief on the interwebs. He writes very well about comic books, and that is what we're going to speak about in our main event. But first, we got to get the segments.
What do we have today, Brian?
We're going to start with What's Your Jam in just a second, move to Off the Shelf, the Silver Screen, and then Locker Room, basically just so I can prove that it's not just Phil that has Locker Room. So, starting at the start, what is your jam? Far out, man. What's your jam?
This week, my jam is Robbery from Juice WRLD.
Juice WRLD. Because rappers hate vowels.
That's true. I am surprised of how much this is my jam, honestly.
Yeah.
Actually, no, I shouldn't be, because I seem to really like Juice WRLD overall.
Do you know what it is? I figured this out the other day. Like, you don't really get much emo anymore. And emo was a really important music movement for both of us.
That's true. I did wear long sleeve t-shirts underneath short sleeve t-shirts.
Right, exactly, which obviously means you like music.
Right.
Yeah, but emo's kind of been missing. I'm sure it's out there, but it's not like in
it used
the pop.
to be pop music.
Yeah, and
every girl had Panic at the Disco as her autoplay song on her MySpace page. It's true, and you know it.
Oh man, see, yeah, that's a whole different thing. But
we got the MySpace reference in for the day, so that's good.
Solid. It's somewhere out there. I should recover it anyway.
You should definitely not. Juice WRLD though is like essentially emo, just with trap beats and a more, I don't know, hip hop feel.
I agree.
And I think it scratches that itch, man. Like, it started with Lucid Dreams, but Robbery is...
It really goes for it.
Yeah.
I love it.
We've even been going so far as to sort of like mash it up with Miserable at Best from Mayday Parade.
Yeah, we sing over top of it.
And
it's
it
honestly,
works.
it's scary how well
like
it works.
Too well.
There's like an outro at the end where, he's not singing and it's just the music. And if you put it in there, it's pretty choice.
Mm-hmm.
So you're welcome.
So are you DJing professionally yet with this, or is that something that you're saying?
It's coming.
It's more like semi-pro karaoke.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Like singing the wrong song over another song.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a new thing.
Maybe
we've
that's
just
something we
invented.
should be doing for our stories on Instagram.
No, we shouldn't.
Even though we're not on social
No.
media, right?
Yeah.
Wait, I'm taking a break. Oh, I'm back.
Oh, wow. The Soph digs.
Hey.
She's not even here to defend
She
herself.
won't listen.
That's true. Yeah, she's not on it, so she won't listen.
Phil's probably cracking up right now listening to this and be like, oh my gosh. Okay. Now that we got that out of the way, yeah, Robbery. I really like this song, and I hope you check it out. What about you, Brian? What's your jam? Is that also your jam?
Yeah, man. Like, I don't know. I don't know what my life is anymore. You've made me like hip-hop. I also like Back at It from Boogie with a Hoodie.
That one I don't get.
Who's also featured on that most excellent Into the Spider-Verse soundtrack. So, just saying.
Just saying. What
Good
about you,
stuff.
Michael? What is your jam right now?
Well, obviously, because it's the Oscars this evening, although when people hear this, we will have traveled into the future and it will be past. I've been thinking of Brian all day as I've listened to the A Star is Born soundtrack, because I know that's a passion we share. And I'm more comfortable weeping openly when I listen to it than he is. And that's okay. Everybody's at a different level with sharing that emotion.
I'm 100% comfortable openly weeping but I'm not comfortable with country music, as has been stated multiple times on this podcast.
Oh, wow.
I get that he wears a cowboy hat in the opening scene of that one trailer, but just because he wears a cowboy hat doesn't mean it's country music. We've talked about this. Alt rock and folk rock are totally different genres.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Mm-hmm. It just sounds like you're being shallow.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. All right, Brian.
Do we sing together now, or do we do that later? When
I think
like
that's
an
later.
outcast?
Yeah, that's after everyone else goes to bed.
That's for our Patreon subscribers.
Yeah, we'd have to pay people to listen to that. It'd have to be backward. Please sign up for $1 if you'll listen to this.
You get Mayday Parade sung to Juice WRLD, and you get Brian and Michael singing Shallow.
I'm gonna let Brian do the Lady Gaga parts.
Oh, I was just about to say I'm definitely Gaga, so I hope you do.
Well, that's good. We're agreed.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, enough with that silliness.
Yeah, that's just the whole podcast, honestly.
And we're done.
All right, so to transition from our eloquent musical conversation to off the shelf.
Turn off the television. In fact, why don't you turn off all the lights except for the one over your favourite chair? It's time for Off the Shelf.
So I think this one is all me because Shelby doesn't know how to read. We're working on it.
Wow. Okay. Well, I don't have Phil and Sos to talk about True Beauty.
She just finished
right?
C-Spot Run last week, so we're going to move up from there.
True Beauty was great this week. That's all I have.
Yes, we are still sponsored by True Beauty. Don't worry. But anyway, since last week we gushed about Alita, which I loved very much and would go watch again, I decided I needed to read the manga from which it was inspired. So I did. I started with the first volume. It's actually free to Prime members. So if you have Prime and you want to read it, go do it before they take it away. I don't know how Prime works. Do they move things on and off, or is it constant?
I think they move things on and off.
Yeah, I thought so too. So anyway, just do it now because it's good. Michael's probably doing it right now as we speak.
The fact that I can read stuff for free on Prime, that for some reason, is that new, or did I just discover it a couple months ago? It's completely changed my life. It's really exciting.
Yeah, I don't know if it's new or not.
I know in the Kindle library, there are always books that you can download for free each month.
Right, yeah, there's different ones.
Featured books.
Yeah.
But there seems to be a rotating comic that you can also download for free.
And anything that adds to the elitism, I can pretend being a Prime member is good. Excuse me, how long did you wait for that to ship? That must be nice. Mine's coming tomorrow. And by the way, look what I'm reading for free, too.
Yes, and watching.
Yeah.
Not only
look at all these great shows
shipping,
you can't find.
I get media.
It is pretty dope, though. We're not actually sponsored by Prime, but we should be. Just saying.
Well, we're getting you that much closer. See, that's what this is.
But anyway, the Alita manga is honestly almost 80% different than the actual film. But it's also really good. And you can see how they kind of weave things together. What I found most interesting so far is Hugo is completely absent from the manga. I'm through the first volume and this character doesn't exist. So I don't know if they created him for the movie to be this weird love interest.
If they did, I'm going to be very disappointed.
The original male Fridge. Well, I mean, isn't that kind of funny, though, if they created, a dude to be the throwaway love interest? I mean,
yeah.
It's still kind of lame that they did that, but it's interesting that it's the opposite of what you would normally expect. So anyway, long story short, it's very good, and I recommend it highly. If you liked Alita, or if you didn't like Alita, maybe read it and see if you like it better since it's so different. So.
See, because I haven't, the movie looked intriguing, but I'm just not a James Cameron fan. And so it's one of those where
I'm
everybody
not
was
either, but I do like Rodriguez, so he kind of canceled the Cameron out.
And your endorsement of this, I appreciate, because I know you're not a huge, everybody lost their mind about his Avatar. No, and I remember sitting there going I love this movie when it was Pocahontas.
Right, exactly.
Or Dances with Wolves.
Dances with Wolves, yes, that's the first thing I said.
Any movie where
I was why did I just watch Dances with Wolves with blue people?
He just made them blue.
Yeah.
So your excitement behind it has gotten me a little closer to seeing it, because I just I saw the trailer the first time, I'm this is interesting, and then I saw his name and I'm nope, hard pass.
I do that with Michael Bay.
Yeah.
Like if they made a new Star Wars movie and it was Michael Bay, I wouldn't watch it.
Oh, I
Yeah.
would, because I think that'd be funny.
It would be a lot of explosions.
I would be like, explosion, played by explosion.
Yeah. Oh man. But yeah, what do you got, Michael? Are you reading anything? I know you're always reading comics. So what's the latest and greatest?
Well, on the non-comic note, I guess maybe this is heavier than the comic. I'm reading The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, which
Ooh.
looks at, I read excerpts of the book before it came out in 2012, and it looks at how the prison system in the U.S. Disproportionately targets minorities in the country.
Mm-hmm. There's a, what was that documentary we watched? It was very similar to that.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what it's called, but anyway.
And it's for one of the classes that I teach. As we move into the second half of the year, it's very social justice oriented. And so we're doing the unit. We'll be starting next week on
13th. That's the
Oh,
Netflix.
13. It's
13th.
about the 13th of a minute?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And so we're talking about institutionalized racism. And so I just figured every year I like to read something new to just add to what we'll discuss. So,
Well, it's a good month to read it.
yeah.
And it's always good to have like out of the curriculum references for stuff like that too.
Well, and I feel especially when I'm talking about racism in class, coming at it as a white middle-class American male, it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, my voice isn't really important here. You know, same when we talk about
I feel like
the
that about talking about anything though.
And we do the same like when we talk about the rights of women. You know, I try and bring in other authors and people who can speak to the experience in a way that I can't. So it's more genuine.
Right on. You really hit it a lot higher brow than I thought.
Well, there's also a Doctor Who novel next to it if you would prefer that. Now that I've stepped into their expanded universe, and so I've been hunting those in used bookstores. So there's also that end of it.
Excellent. That brings it back down to our level.
See, there we go. And it's not as like because that's the book that's sitting on the end table, and I'm like, do I lie? Do I say it? That's sort of emotionally heavy to interject here, but
No, I like it. I appreciate the honesty.
Well,
and the,
it's important to recognize that we're at the same time reading things that are very different in their weight and gravity and.
Well, right, yeah, we don't like always surround ourselves in geekdom. Like there is an entire
I just go the
world
other
out
way
there.
and read like my technical journal for the month.
Yeah.
I think it has to make an interesting experience when I'm like working out at a coffee shop and somebody will look up and I'm reading The New Jim Crow. And then they look up a little bit later and I've taken a break and I'm reading like The Amazing Spider-Man. And they're like, what is going on over there?
Yeah. He's doing some strange research. All right, so let's put things back on the shelf and now have a seat for the silver screen.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats for the silver screen. Well, we watched a movie on Netflix this weekend.
We did.
We had a day where we didn't leave the house, and it was glorious.
Yeah, we're basically shut-ins.
I really like when we dedicate a day to that.
Mm-hmm.
It's much needed. But we watched Velvet Buzzsaw.
And I wish
I haven't heard of that.
Oh, it's not good. The trailer looked so good.
And it has Jake Gyllenhaal in it, which is just like an immediate okay for me.
We need your girlfriend to review it.
Yeah, it's technically a horror movie, so
Okay, but how scary though? Because you're
Not.
saying technically
No.
there
It's-
are only so many things I pass along to Kaylee if it's
It's not very
Gonna
scary.
scare
it's,
me.
it's really not scary. Like you could probably watch it and be
I
okay.
watched it and I was fine. So
Yeah.
there you go. And it was like really hard for me to watch. I really enjoyed it, but it was hard. This one was not. This one's kind of like it's comically bad enough that you can get through it.
Yeah, it seemed
Knowing the
like
stuff that you've watched with her before, you're fine.
it seemed like they were going for that American Psycho like satirical making fun of a group of people angle, but it didn't really succeed, and they put in this weird supernatural element that
They just never fleshed out enough. I mean,
yeah,
it was just
and you know, it's not that we need every aspect of every movie to be explained, but it
didn't
just
have a-
kind of existed for no reason.
it didn't have a true point.
Yeah, it was. They needed some horror element, so I mean, they say it in the preview, so no spoilers. But the paintings like come to life, and that's the killer or whatever in the film.
hmm
But yeah, it was.
Well, I think there's a difference between a mysterious part of the plot that you think about afterwards and a plot that's not fully fleshed out. right? Like, you don't need an answer to everything, but it still has to make sense some way.
Right, yeah. It's just kind of like they thought, how are we going to do this? Like, I don't know. Let's have the painting kill him. But how? I don't care.
I don't know,
just do it.
Yeah, and it's a really strange turn the way it goes, and you think it's going to go one way, then it's the other, but not in a twist sort of way, more like a wait, what?
Yeah.
kind of way. Because the premise is it's these people who are really into the high art world where they're buying and selling art for like all this money, and it's it gets into that whole abstract art thing, and then this lady finds all these paintings that were done by this guy that died in her apartment, and that's how all of this happens. Like, his instructions were for all of them to be destroyed, but of course,
yeah, but like the
them
greed
being in the high,
and the
yeah.
whatever like keeps people in there trying to make all this money out of it, and it ends up killing everybody. I don't know.
So it sounds like to me somebody watched Ghostbusters 2 again, tried to make a straight horror movie out of it, and it ended up being less scary. That's what I'm getting. That's what it sounds like.
I forgot that's what happened in Ghostbusters 2.
Vigo the
Oh,
Carpathian, man. That's
Yeah.
Wow.
It's Vigo!
Well, I need to hear what you guys think about this, so please watch it. I mean, it's not the best.
I
hope
mean,
you
like,
watch it.
only watch it if you've got 2 hours with literally nothing else to do. If you want to sit on the back porch and watch the grass grow. No, actually, it's not that bad. It's not like
that bad. There
Hereditary
were
bad.
good parts. Like, at the beginning, I thought, ooh, this is going to be a really good movie.
It is. It sets it up. Like,
And the people in
well.
it makes you think it's going to be good. I mean,
right. Until that lady from Hereditary walked on, and I was like, ugh, it made me think about that movie and how bad it was.
That was not a good movie.
Oh, whew.
Don't understand it.
Thankfully, Kaylee next month is her comprehensive exams for her PhD. So every moment she has is reading and prepping for that, which is horrible for her, but it means I've missed a handful of scary movies that I otherwise would have had to watch. Like, I'll see it roll through the movie theater. I'm like, all right, well, I guess I won't have nightmares tonight. There we go.
Nice. Yeah, that one won't give you nightmares. It'll just make you go like, what did I watch?
So, if you're not having nightmares from the scary movies, what are you watching right now?
Well, I was home sick this week, and so obviously wanting to expand my mind when I wasn't teaching, I watched Ted 2. So that was
That's a great setup.
I could take or leave Ted 1. And I can't believe I've put this much thought into it, but this was my Thursday. I could take or leave Ted 1, but Ted 2 I think is fantastic.
Wow,
so,
the sequel that outdid the original, that's rare.
Because Ted 1 tried to have this, and it did have this weird, creepy, dark undercurrent. Ted 2, they're like, it's a movie about a talking teddy bear that does drugs. Like, it's just all ridiculous comedy, and I appreciate that. Don't try and give me something more cerebral than what I'm signing up for. And then, I mean, if that counts as silver screen watching it at home, which you said
It
Netflix,
does,
I
yeah.
guess it does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The last movie I saw in the theater was last week, and Dirty Dancing was back for like a couple night only screening. So you have to see.
fantastic.
Oh, it was incredible. I love the classic movie. That's one of my favorite things to go to the theater for. And my fingers are crossed that we get a Ghostbusters one because this is their 35th anniversary.
Oh yeah, huh. I would definitely go watch that.
I would see it at every showtime. Like I would just sit there and
Just
not leave
live
the
there.
theater.
All right, now to come out of the movie house into the bright sunlight like Ponyboy and
Oh my gosh.
head literally across the street like I can in Bakersfield and go to the ice rink for the locker room.
Listen up, sports fans. It's time for the locker room.
All right, again, just to prove that it's not Phil that controls the locker room. My hockey team,
Is it Brian Breyer?
it's Brian Brierson or whatever dumb thing I said last
I don't
time. But yeah, my hockey team started their new season today, and our league actually expanded, which is pretty exciting because we've been playing the same teams with relatively the same players. Like 2 or 3 people might move, and then new people come and whatever. But it's mostly been the same teams like smashing each other over and over for 3 years. But now our league is expanded by 2 teams. So there's 2 whole fresh new teams, which we didn't get to play today. We played same old team we've been playing. But they did have 2 new players, which actually was interesting because it kind of changed the whole dynamic. But yeah, it's good. It's good stuff. Bakersfield Ice Complex. come on down Sundays and Thursdays.
My locker room is that video that we found.
Oh, the little kid.
This guy mic'd up his 4-year-old kid because he was very curious of what was going through his head during hockey practice. And it's the most adorable thing I think
Yeah,
I've
it's
seen.
pretty terrific. It really does remind me of myself a lot. Like, he falls down at one point and he's like, I'm just going to take a nap. I'm pretty sure that's gone through my head more than once. So, yeah, it's very good.
That's a really good viral video about sports. That's my contribution.
There you go. Well done. Michael, I know you're a big sports fan, so.
I was going to say, in a surprise twist, you both said literally what I was going to, so you undercut all my athletic knowledge that I was going to share with your listeners. That when people compete for points and do things on a field or in a rink and things are scored, it's exciting.
It is. That's it's the best way I've ever heard that put.
Yay, sport!
Sports ball. All right. And on that note, we'll close the door to the locker room and run out onto the field for the main event.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this is your main event.
All right, this is Michael's time to shine. We're talking about comic books.
Yay!
Yeah, and this is more like, I don't know how I got the idea for this. Actually, I do know how I got the idea for this. I lied. I was reading Alita, like I said, and I thought to myself, how come we have so many American comic books, but we don't get any transition from there until, we had a smattering, but until recently, there's all these live action movies and TV shows. But how come basically every Japanese manga, not every, that's a little hyperbolic, but anyway, how come so many get turned into animated series, but our comic books, they have animated series, but it never really translates. Like, they kind of make it like a kid thing out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? That is what made me start this whole idea. So I guess we can just start on that question. Why do you think that we haven't gone that route and we've become this comic to live action medium instead of comic to animation? To now you're getting a lot of live actions done of manga anime, but it wasn't really a thing until recently.
I wonder if it has to do with maybe our approach to the genres in the West. I think they're not necessarily deservedly so, but I think we put more of a weight on a live action film than we do an animated film. And so maybe
that's because people still, even though we have like Adult Swim and all this stuff, people still think of animated stuff as for kids.
Yes. And I think maybe it has to do with the content. I think there's a perception around things like Adult Swim or sort of like the Fox cartoons and things like that it's sort of a generically like crass or lowbrow sort of adult humor. And then you have the animated stuff that's just for kids. And I don't think people are necessarily aware that I'm speaking clearly in unfair generalities, that the medium can do a lot more.
Well, I think Into the Spider-Verse proves that.
Oh, absolutely. But I had conversations with at least 3 different people where I had to start by clarifying, like, it's not just a kid's movie. Because they're like, it looks good, but I don't really want to see a kid's movie. But they did so much more. You couldn't pull half that off, even with the best digital effects in a live action movie.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of where we're missing out. Like, I don't know the ins and outs of the industry, but it has to be more cost effective to do something like that than it does to do all that CGI and like mocap and to do all those things. It has to be cheaper to have it drawn or, whatever. I guess it's all CGI technically at this point because it's all done with computers, but you know what I mean? Yeah.
And I wonder if Into the Spider-Verse will change that because Sony's doubling down on it. They have an Into the Spider-Verse 2, a Spider-Gwen spinoff. I wonder if we'll start to see that transition.
I think we will. I honestly think that we're finally opening up to the idea that adults like cartoons too.
Do you think that has to do with the fact that the people that are adults now are the people that grew up seeing things like anime and grew up watching cartoons and still enjoy them, and that's why we're getting that transition, because the adults now are the people that like cartoons.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that the people who are adults now, or of age, I guess, they to actually go to the theater by themselves without having to ask someone's permission.
That is when you become an adult officially.
Exactly.
When you can just go to the movies whenever you want.
And not have
Adulthood.
to ask anybody. Exactly. That's the generation that has had the internet and accessibility to a lot of animated series in other parts of the world that wasn't really accessible before.
And on that accessibility note, I think things like Netflix and Amazon Prime and Hulu and all that stuff are changing things, because people, now that, you can stream whatever you want whenever you want it, it's expanding what people are watching. I mean, look at documentaries. How we were just talking about one earlier. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you couldn't pay a kid to sit down and watch a documentary. Like when the lights went out in a classroom, they're like, okay, well now I'm napping for the next 20 minutes. But now people willingly watch that. So maybe, I mean, and you see like the rebirth of, like She-Ra has been reborn. Castlevania,
really
like there are so many, I think that platform is expanding it. And as people are growing up watching it that way, they carry those choices with them into adulthood.
And that's mostly because, going off of this idea of Netflix changing things, streaming platforms changing things, thinking to documentaries, you would never see a documentary taking up primetime television time. Ever.
No.
To gain access to even really good documentaries, you would have to go to a library, check it out,
Get that microfiche.
take it home, and watch it. And then, of course, before you watch it, you had to make sure it's rewound.
Yeah, because you have to be kind.
Be kind.
Rewind.
Man, some people really don't.
Yeah, I was going to say, everyone under about like 20 is like, what the heck
What
are they
is
talking
this?
about?
No one else had a separate little machine that would rewind all your tapes.
Oh, I remember that. Oh, that was awesome.
Yeah, our VCR could do both, so it was pretty high class.
Yeah, well,
Just
the
saying.
separate one, it did it like even
Yeah, it was
faster.
like super
It was
fast.
super
Yeah.
fast.
And then you're not waiting. You put the next VHS tape in, and then while the other one's rewinding,
Yep.
you're not slowing down.
Yep, exactly.
The old-fashioned binging. Quick, put in the next tape.
But honestly, I mean, you're not having to worry about taking up time slots. So whenever you're not having to take up a time slot and it's just on a streaming platform, people are willing to watch more. And you don't have to worry about taking up space on DVR or remembering to record something. You're never battling. Those shows aren't going to have to battle for time. And the same goes with any sort of animated series. Those shows are not battling for time because they're just accessible whenever you want them. And then you have, looking at what other people have watched and hearing from what other people have watched. You're able to share things
And
like,
hearing
well,
podcasts that tell you what to watch.
that's true as well. But you're right. Bringing up platforms, I think that is one of the biggest game changers.
But why then is it really just the cartoons are for kids thing that's keeping you? Because I mean, even we've expanded past the whole MCU DC universes. We've had things like the Umbrella Academy on Netflix now, but it's live action. Like, why is it just that simple that the cartoons are still for kids in the Western world, that we have skipped that sort of page to animation to live action? We're just going.
Well, I also think to a degree, at least from the studio's end's, profit probably ties into it. Because
profit ties into everything in the Western
there's
world.
that sense that if cartoons are primarily for kids, you're not throwing the net as wide as you could otherwise.
Yeah, your demographic is small.
So whereas something like Avengers Infinity War, Black Panther, Captain Marvel, I just read, is now the third highest pre-sale tickets for any superhero movie. Live action brings in money in a way that most animated films don't. So, I mean, Hollywood's not going to branch out until they're certain they're going to make as much money, So I think between that stigma of looking at more for kids and the fact that they know live action is going to net more money, I think that's part of what drives that focus.
Well, let's transition a bit there, talking about how they've seemed to have more success going from the page to film. There are obviously comic book series, but you'd think as a serial medium that comics would translate better to like a TV series rather than these like, you know, several one-off movies. Sure, they made like Iron Man 1, 2, and 3, but they weren't necessarily serial format.
Yeah.
But why do you think that is? Do you think it's just chasing the money? Like big theater releases make more money than a TV series? Do you think? I don't know. You tell me. You're the expert. Let's hear what you say.
Well, that's certification, as we already mentioned. I think you're right. I think that because if you look at how much Endgame is probably going to make, as opposed to watching every Marvel Netflix show when they existed for the price of your Netflix subscription a month.
Yeah.
So I think if they focus, but also, and I, because I think you're right, logically a TV series would be easier. But looking at the Netflix examples, the first season of Luke Cage blew me away. I thought it was the best that Marvel TV had done. I got maybe 4 episodes into season 2 and I lost interest. Same thing with Jessica Jones. I thought the first season was great. The second season, I'm sitting there saying, you're doing nothing new. Like, it's okay, she's drunk, she's angry, that's where we are. I haven't even started Daredevil season 3 just because the interest wasn't there. And like, I love this stuff, but the follow-up seasons, with the exception of Daredevil season 2, I really liked, something's lost in that. And I don't know why. Maybe it's the writers, maybe it's the showrunners. I don't know what, because it would make more sense that it would be easier to expand the world that way.
Do you think it's because maybe they aren't pulling in that like money, that they don't put as much money into it and therefore it kind of drops off? Or
well, maybe, but I guess I'm thinking about it. I'm showing my Marvel bias because if you look at DC,
I have
right,
100%
like they have
Marvel bias. Like I don't even watch
well,
the
had,
DC stuff.
And I don't watch a lot of it, but they had Smallville, which spun out into Arrow, which spun out Supergirl, and what's that? Legends of Tomorrow, League of Tomorrow, whatever, Black Lightning. Like, so they have this whole superhero interconnected universe going on that when they started making their movies, everybody was saying, listen, just make it more like the TV show. Like, that stuff is working better. So maybe it just has to do with the talent that they're hiring for it.
Yeah, that is interesting that you say that, though. And I think most of the DC TV is actually on TV, where the Marvel stuff is, aside from S.H.I.E.L.D. and Carter, which I'm not even sure if it's still on.
I know that isn't. I don't know about S.H.I.E.L.D. I know Peggy Carter got cut after 2 seasons.
Yeah, I think S.H.I.E.L.D. is either just finished or might still be going. But anyway, do you think maybe that's it? That like DC was like, we are putting this on actual TV, selling ads, making some revenue. We can do a better job. And you think that's all it was? Or is that just too easy?
Part of it, but also, and again, from my knowledge of it, the DC stuff connects. I think the Marvel TV series hits sort of the problem Star Wars entered into in the Disney era, where like everything connects, right? Because if you want me to believe that the Netflix shows exist in the same universe as the MCU, then you get those 4 Defenders in Infinity War. Mm-hmm. It makes no sense that they're not there. I mean, you don't even see Avengers Tower in the cityscape shots where it should be. And that's just a little CGI drop-in on those shows. And S.H.I.E.L.D., like, they have this whole, you know, whatever, the Kree were there and they were looking for Inhumans. And we're supposed to think, as paranoid as Tony was after that wormhole, he wouldn't be aware of that. Or he wouldn't be. So, you know, or he's not checking up. Like, you have the whole Civil War, right? Like, we need somebody to rein us in. But then you have the Punisher hanging people on meat hooks in Hell's Kitchen and Daredevil beating people bloody, and Tony doesn't care about that. Like, so I think that can be, I think there's, at least for me personally, there's a level of frustration there. Let's just call them separate universes. We have a multiverse, right? Like, let's do that. And because it hits a certain point where it's insulting, I feel when there should be obvious lineups, but there isn't.
You know, I also think part of it is mainstream. These stories from comics are not as familiar to people, and you can get someone who isn't really into comics to watch a 2-hour movie, but you may not be able to get them to watch 10 episodes of a show.
Oh, yeah, so that accessibility.
Also, just like, why would a lot of them are not going to spend their binge time watching superheroes.
especially as you said, if it doesn't line up with the movies they
Yeah.
love.
And it does, like, they can't afford the kind of effects and huge fight scenes.
Well,
and,
right, yeah, it's not gonna translate. They're not gonna be the same. The
and
quality
you
is
can't,
gonna
and
be
you
different.
can't get the kind of actors that you're expecting either.
Yeah, I think they did a pretty good job with casting, but I see what you mean. They're not gonna be like super.
I mean,
like,
they're
the
not
same level.
They're not to the blockbuster level of what you can spend on a Marvel movie.
That's
Or
fair.
even that crossover with the actors, right? There was an episode with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. early on where there was all sorts of Asgardian stuff going on, and Sif shows up. So that's cool, you have Lady Sif. But Chris Hemsworth isn't going to do a walk-on 10-minute spot on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So then there's
you would think
that
they would
sense
put that
of
in their
disconnect.
contracts, though, man. Like,
Yes, why not?
come on. Where are the legal people not thinking this through?
They're to blame.
Yeah. Well, to that end, like, I don't watch the DC stuff. I've said that before. That universe doesn't interest me outside of Batman. Sorry. But they had the Flash on their Justice League, and he is from a television show. And I thought that was pretty, like, just that fact was rad to me. Like, I still didn't want to watch it because, but anyway, that I think is what's working for DC that Marvel isn't doing well. Unfortunately, nothing else seems to be working for DC, but.
Well, Wonder Woman was good, which is why
That's
they're trying
true.
to put their cameo on
I always
in every film.
forget.
Thanks, Brian.
I always forget that Wonder Woman's like a DC thing. I think
Yeah.
of that movie like existing by itself.
Well, in Aquaman, it wasn't as brilliant as Wonder Woman, but it had a fun sort of like 80s adventure flick going, sort of like, it seemed like they were trying to be very Indiana Jones. Like, we're trying to find this mystical artifact. We're traveling all over the world. It maybe could have been half an hour to 45 minutes shorter for me, but I mean, it was still all right. It wasn't like Justice League or Batman versus Superman or anything like that.
Yeah, I've actually heard several people say that Aquaman is watchable, if not halfway decent, especially if you have the expectations that I would have going into it, thinking this is going to be terrible. And I hate it.
It has ocean to ocean in it.
Oh, yeah.
How can you not like a movie with that song in it?
That is not
Zero
a mark in the
expectation.
pro column right there. Sorry.
It has Mr. Worldwide. That's all I gotta say.
Does he cameo and have the song in the actual
I
movie, though?
wish. I wish he was
No.
a fish in it.
He was a
Singing it.
fish. That would have been if only Aquaman existed in the MCU, and then they could have had like Nemo and Dory in the background, just somewhere chilling. That's the crossover we all want.
Oh
Honestly.
my gosh.
All right, to get out of this hole we've built for ourselves. So we talked a little bit about different IPs crossing over into basically books with your Doctor Who novel. But what do you think about IPs that start in different mediums transitioning to comics instead of, comics branching out to expand their universe? Star Wars, Avatar, The Last Airbender did it. Firefly's done it. Do you think comics are a safe medium for IPs to use to branch out? Is it a way to catch a certain demographic, or is it something else entirely that you're going to enlighten us on?
Well, I think first, as far as branching out, it's relatively cheap comparatively, right? Like, I know both Buffy and Smallville had they continued their quote unquote seasons in the comic line after the show ended.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know IDW has, this is great, I get to reference them for the third time in the show. IDW has a Ghostbusters line, which is really cool. And so there's no special effects, it's just limited by what they come up with and what they draw. So I think it's, and I would presume for the companies, it plays on the nostalgia market. Like, I know IDW has a Ghostbusters comic, a Ninja Turtles comic, Transformers, Back to the Future,
They have
all these.
I think it's them. Someone does a Rick and Morty comic too, and I think
Yes,
there's
yeah, I
Adventure
think they do
Time
as well.
comics.
Yep.
Yeah, so basically any IP that you like, there's probably some comic out there for it.
And it's a relatively, cause they're not cheap, obviously, entirely with the $4 cover price, but it's cheaper than a show or a movie or something like that. So it's a way for people who are looking for more to find it. But I don't know if it works the other way. I don't know if somebody's going to randomly pick up a Transformers comic and be like, this robot turns into a car, and then jump on Netflix to watch it. I don't know if it works that way. It might. I don't know.
You don't think that's like an entry point for some of these IPs that have spread out to comics? People aren't picking up a comic and being like, oh my gosh, oh wow, look at all this extra universe that exists outside of this comic.
Well, I think it's hard because I don't think they're super accessible, right? Like, when I was a kid, every grocery store, drugstore, gas
that
station.
wire spinning rack.
Yes,
Yep.
yes. And so that's where I would find these, and they were like a buck 25, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I would ask Mom for one, and she was awesome. And if it was a book, of course, there's no reason to not take a book home. And so you would find these characters and you would find these worlds. Now, a couple years ago, I had an aunt and uncle who were in town, and I was going over to meet them for dinner. And I said I was swinging by the comic shop first, and they were surprised because they 100% thought comic book stores were something The Big Bang Theory invented for the show. Like, yeah,
That's funny.
It blew their mind, and they're like, what's there? And I'm like, comic books, used books, new books, like gaming stuff, like all, and they had no idea. And so, like, yeah, I mean, you can order them on Amazon, but if you're not already knowing to search for them, it's going to be hard to find. And like Barnes and Nobles and Books A Million have graphic novel sections, but those tend to have your Spider-Man and your Superman over something like Rick and Morty or Transformers or whatever. So I think that's part of the problem as far as bringing new people to that IP, is it's not really easy to get a hold of them.
Honestly, I kind of disagree with you because of how accessible digital is for comics now.
Oh, yeah.
Especially getting things for free sometimes. So, you know, I'm not going to go buy a comic book, honestly. Probably not. A physical one. I really enjoy reading comics on my iPad because it's easy, and if I don't like it, I don't have to throw something in the garbage or feel like I need to hold on to it or anything like that. I can just, it's just there. It's in the cloud. It doesn't take up space in my life. And then I can zoom in. I can really kind of appreciate the art a little better, in my opinion. I think it looks better sometimes on a screen. And then you can browse stuff. You can try things out for free first.
It gives you that same, oh, you like this, but maybe you should try this, this, and this, where you have to have the right kind of guy at the comic book store to do that for you instead of the
guy that wants to sell you another book.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you have to, or the guy that just is annoyed that you're there. Unfortunately, like there are several comic book stores where I don't know if it's like they have a stereotype like the DMV and they feel like they have to live up to it, but you'll go in and the guy looks at you like, why are you in my store?
Well, they turn into clubhouses sometimes instead of places of business.
Yeah. And that's, we talk about autos here. It's not a comic book store, it's a game store, but man, that guy is like welcoming to every single person, and you can talk to him and he'll give you like 15 recommendations for games. Oh, you like this, you should try this, 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 or this. He's like fabulous. And then we have another shall not be named comic book store here where you walk in and you get that, like they look at you like over the top of the computer like, ugh, customers, and they just shrink back down.
And in that instance, don't you want to be like, listen, you're part of a relatively dying industry. Like, you are a small physical bookstore that you need me to come in. Like, you should be celebrating that somebody's here to buy something.
Like, you should jump over the case in front of you and, like, come shake my hand and ask me if I need coffee or anything. Yeah. No, not really like that. But, you know, some happy medium between those two. But using this idea that Shelby brought up as a transition, there was a time when comics were at least as much a collectible as a storytelling device. Is that still the case at all? Or do you think comics will continue to be collectible merchandise into the future? Or do you think this digital age will eventually just squash the physical product?
If the digital age starts to squash the physical product, then I think they will become more of a collectible again. Because I think they were a collectible because nobody saved them, right? Like, my parents growing up had a huge box that they will regale us with stories of like 10-cent comics in grandma's basement, right? That all got thrown out when they were done with them. That, I'm sure, had the first appearance of Spider-Man, Hulk, Fantastic Four, things that you could pay for college with now. But
that's a really good way to put that.
Yeah, like that. And so now, though, like starting in the 80s, when the idea of like comic collecting became a thing, and especially in the 90s, everything was saved. So if everybody has a copy of everything, it's not a collectible. So the rise of digital comic books might, though it would be smaller, it might bring back that collector market for somebody who wants the physical item.
Do you think that's basically the reason they do things like limited variant covers and things like that?
Oh
Just
my
to kind of
gosh.
preserve. Uh-oh. I feel a diatribe coming on.
No, it's just so, when Action Comics hit 1,000 issues, I think there was something like 10 or 15 different variant covers. But the weird thing is like there were guys in my local comic shop who were like, I want one of everyone. And I'm like, it's the same comic book. But I think that's it. I think people are thinking like, oh, which one's going to be worth it? And I'm like, well, you just spent, $50 on a bunch of variant covers for the same story.
Hey, guess what?
And I guess
when you get the digital comic at the end, it has all the variant covers at the end.
Yeah, that's true.
And you get to see them all.
And I guess I've never been one to really look at comic books as a collecting thing. Like, I'm sure I have a couple in my boxes that are worth something. But for me, it's always been a matter of, like, I read it because I enjoy the story, right? And I guess that's
me,
even
like,
how...
to a T, yeah.
That's how I make the difference between, like, what I read digitally and what I read physically. Because, like you said, Shelby, storing them, it's like that, those take up space quickly, right? And so if it's a story that I really like or a new book that I really want to make certain I support as thoroughly as I can because it's ridiculous, but Marvel and DC and the big companies, when they look at what they're cutting and what they're keeping, they don't look at trade paperback sales. They put digital purchases second to what's actually purchased in a physical copy in the comic book store. So like the ones that I really love or a new title that I want to support, I'll make certain I buy a physical copy. But the other ones I will just read digitally. And just because it's a space thing, like I only have so much room in my home for long and short boxes of comics.
Yeah, have you Marie Kondo'd your comic book collection yet?
No, because I like to think if it shows up in the box, then I do love it.
It
That's
sparks
cool.
joy.
Well, that's so interesting because I know that I used to feel that way about any female-inspired or owned companies that would be producing things for women that are into kind of geeky things. I was like, oh, I have to spend money on this to prove that there's a market for it. And, kind of that whole voting with your dollars thing. When in actuality, I don't want the thing. I just want it to exist. And
Yeah.
I don't know how how this would work in the future, but imagine if you just put money towards something saying, no, I want this to continue. Like, maybe you don't want the physical
just
comic.
donate
Yeah.
to, like, comics.
Make sure that it still happens. It's almost kind of like a Kickstarter, you know what I mean? It's like, here,
Except
I give
you don't
money.
get anything.
Except you don't get anything. But maybe you should. I don't know.
Be interesting.
Yeah, it's and like now there are some comics that I find myself reading exactly like you said, Shelby, because it's like I'm not really into this, but I would like to see more of this. And then I sort of hit the point where I'm like, okay, well, maybe okay, this one's not for me. If this is going to live, somebody else is going to be the one to support it. But there are those weird moments where I have like social justice guilt where I'm like, I'm not really enjoying this story, but I need to keep reading it because I want to support this.
Yeah. I feel like I always have that conflict with a lot of stuff. Just like anything that you put money towards. It's like, I want to monetarily support this, but it's also not my thing.
Yeah. And then you get kind of mad at them. Like, I'm here for you. Why don't you make better stuff?
I know.
And then sometimes, and again, I can speak more to Marvel than to DC, they will pull the plug on something that's so promising because the first 2 issues don't sell enough in pre-orders, like just in the physical copies. And I'm like, this is a brilliant, it feels new, it feels fresh. I've never read anything like this before. But because the first 2 issues didn't sell enough, you're going to run another Iron Man comic. And so, yay!
And this is also how I feel about webtoons. I love webtoons. They're free. And now they've started to try and monetize it a little bit by saying, here, buy these coins on the app, and then you can read things ahead of time. And I don't really know how their business model is completely set up, and I feel like I should research it, but I almost feel compelled to buy these coins and read this stuff ahead of time to say, yes, I love this, please keep doing this, because, I mean, as far as comics go, this is what I read. I read webtoons almost every day.
Well, it's one of those things like, if I buy this, will this, if I spend this piddly amount or whatever, will this continue to be free? Or if I spend this, does the author / illustrator, whatever,
Make more
get
money?
anything from
Yeah.
it? Or does this all go to you and it just benefits me and the
Because I
providers
would
get
love to
nothing?
support the author so that, I mean, there's a lot of authors on there that their goal is to monetize and be able to quit their day jobs and do this. And I would love to support that. And I know that they a lot of times will have Patreons plugged at the end of their comics, and you can do that. And now it seems like they're trying to figure out how to kind of integrate that into the Webtoons app.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. Because
I'm okay with it as long as the artist gets a cut somehow.
Exactly. Because I also understand, I mean, the amount of time that goes into developing a web platform and keeping it up to date.
Well, I can't believe it's
that's
free.
a lot. I can't either.
It's a good platform, like you said. It's not clunky. It works really well. It's got really great content. Like I'm shocked that it's free. Please don't start charging for it.
I mean, I'll buy it, but please don't.
Yeah, don't make me buy it, please.
Well, and those sort of online comics too are where, you'll look at companies like Marvel or DC or Image, and they'll sort of pick people up from there. They look at people like artists or these authors, and they'll sort of like, okay, well, this person's built a following. They're pretty good. Let's give them a shot here. So it does sort of help, it's a great avenue for people to showcase their work as well.
Right. And you see it on social media too. I mean, you'll have, especially the huge rise of 4-panel comics, and you see that on Instagram a lot. And then those people have this following, and then they go and publish a book, and it's incredible to me to see how that happens.
I mean, that's essentially what Penny Arcade grew out of, and look at it now. Like, it's huge conventions and all this stuff. It's crazy. But as far as I know, it just started off as like a little webcomic.
But the whole idea of, memes and comics, like they intersect between the two. There's a lot of really funny drawings that people do.
Yeah.
And, people always think comics as like superhero stuff, but it's also the newspaper funnies. It's but which is turned now into the Instagram funnies.
Yeah.
Or, whatever social media platform you're
memes.
using. The memes. But we forget that that's also comics, and people consume that a lot. I mean, you look at how many likes and shares that those kinds of things have.
Well, and to kind of close this up, I think just in pop culture in general, comics are probably, or at least the stories from comics, are as popular now as they've ever been. And it seems to just be continually going up. But the actual comics, like I went to Comic-Cron, I think that's what it's called. It's a website that does like statistics and sales and things like that. And it seems like sales-wise, things hit a peak at about 2015, 2016. And the only thing that's really gone up since then is the price. So is this a medium that is going to be kind of phased out and live on in, movies, series, things like that? Or do you think it's always going to be something that exists? Will comics always be there?
It would be hard to imagine it being completely gone, but just because I lack the ability to imagine it doesn't mean that's the case, right? I mean, if you look through history, art forms or genres have dropped off and they grow. But I think the big issue that they face, one is sort of accessibility, right? Like, and not just like the physical sense, but jumping into that. When you look at a character with decades of history, like, if you like Spider-Man, you could watch Captain America Civil War, Homecoming, Endgame, or Infinity War, and that's his whole MCU career, as opposed to 60 years in the comic books. So, like, I'll talk to family and friends and even students, and they'll say, like, oh, I really like fill-in-the-blank character, but they're like, I don't know where to start reading it. And so, and then even where to find them. Like, I was talking to a couple students about Marvel Unlimited, which is like their approach to Netflix, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not the newest comics, but it's starting from 6 months ago. You can get them going back to like 61. Yeah, like, and a lot of them didn't even, and not everything's on there. There's a lot on there, but then they unveil new stuff every month as they go forward. And so, and everybody I've referenced that to had no idea that it existed. Mm-hmm. And so there's the sense that because it's everywhere, right? Like there are comic t-shirts everywhere. Exactly. Everybody's reading them. They're talking about them. Or not reading them. They're going to the movies. They're watching the shows. They're playing the video games, like that Spider-Man video game that just came out. Yeah. Like it blew my kids' minds. I obviously can't play it because my video game ability stopped when I had to do more than jump over an obstacle.
Pitfall
but-
was your pitfall?
Yeah, that was Sonic 3. I'm like, what are we doing here? There's too much happening. I can't.
Underwater levels. Nope, I'm out.
Yeah, too much. But so I think people are intimidated to start reading that. And then where do you go to find it, right? Like you said, walking into a comic shop, even if the person behind the counter isn't a jerk, that can be kind of intimidating.
It's true.
But everybody knows the characters, so it's crazy. Like, I will watch like a whole class sit there talking about it, and I'll think in high school and I'll be like, wow, I would have killed for 2 other people who cared who the Hulk was, right? When I was in 10th grade, like, just, they had to be out there somewhere, but it wasn't anything that people were open about.
Yeah, I think about that all the time where it's you see this funny like fandom infighting and stuff, especially on social media, like poo-poo on social media, but still like and I think to myself, man, I wish I had someone that I could hate because they like the same thing as me instead of like just clinging to someone that I don't actually really like, but they're the only person I can talk to about my fandom. So like I chill with them because this is what I'm left with.
Well, there's also comic book stores are not a welcoming place for women.
Oh yeah, I mean,
you're missing out on a huge demographic there because, I mean, what woman is going to go in by herself? I mean, there's not a lot of us, frankly, that are going to go and walk into a comic store by themselves. And I can't tell you how many times people are like, so is your boyfriend into comics?
Yeah.
Are you getting a gift for him?
Too.
Yeah, you do.
And then I turn around and they're like, oh, the cute girl with the long hair has a beard.
Oh, there's a lot of like jokes about it too.
Well, I mean, they've touched on that on Big Bang again, like to reference the only place where comic book stores exist. But didn't Penny go in one episode, or maybe Penny and I haven't watched this show for a long time. Forgive me. Howard's girlfriend, the one with the high voice. I think they went in one time.
Bernadette.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there was an episode where they both like went in together and like everyone just kind of like stopped looking at everything and just looked at the girls. And I mean,
it's an exaggeration.
Yeah, it's funny.
But there's a reason why it's funny.
Right, yeah. Because it's funny because it's true.
Kind of true.
Yeah.
Well, and even I think sometimes the physical layout, like I love my local comic shop because I swear it's what every indie bookstore and every like indie art house movie tries to be. Like books are stacked everywhere. Every square inch of space is taken up. But if you don't know what you're looking for, like I went in with a friend over the summer who was looking to pick some stuff up, and they had no idea where to start. They're like, so what's new? What am I like it was, if you didn't already know what you were looking for, it's intimidating just going in because there's hundreds and hundreds of, here's the back issues, here's the relevant one. This is not the run you're looking for because everything gets a new number 1 every 4 months.
Yeah, exactly.
I honestly hate that cluttered feel. I mean,
I
go in, I'm like, I hate this.
Over Christmas, my sister lives in Cleveland now, and we went to a couple comic book shops there, and some of them have like ridiculous amount of cool stuff, but they just had stuff everywhere. Like especially Magic is apparently really big in Cleveland. Magic the Gathering, the card game. And we walked into these places and there'd be literally Magic cards in piles everywhere. Like you'd have to move the pile to look through stuff. Like there's just piles of cards. It was crazy to me. And like my brother said, there was this
it was a Hot Toys.
Yeah, there was a Hot Toys
it was a
DeLorean
on the floor.
On the floor. Like just collecting dust with something else randomly like leaning up against it. My brother like almost had an aneurysm.
No, he was just like
yeah, because he's a huge collector. Like when we talked about the comics not being collectibles, like he's probably gonna like fly over here and punch me in the face. But yeah, it was insane. And you're right, like the layout is crazy. They have all those bins with like
it stresses me out. Like
sometimes
frankly it
they
does.
are not in any order really, and it's just yeah, it is. It's stressful. You walk in and you're like, I want something, but I also want to leave.
Well, I even know for myself, like, I mean, I've loved comic books forever, but I was trying to find a back issue of Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't know, number 15, 19, whatever it was. I found 3 number 19s. None of them were the one that I was looking for. And I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, it was so frustrating because I'm going through the back issue boxes and this is the wrong run. This is the wrong creator. This is the wrong whatever. Like, just so even for somebody who's grown up around this stuff, I was sitting there and I walked out. I gave up. I'm like, you know what? Forget it. I'm going to go treat myself to a soft pretzel and that's good enough for me.
That's my boy. Yes.
Oh man, I wish we would have done an over and under
Full
on
circle.
whether or not he
I
brings
knew
that up or not.
I knew it was going to happen. And I was waiting. It's like
Oh.
pretzel.
Can't
Today's
disappoint.
episode is sponsored by Auntie Anne's.
I wish. Shoot.
Run to your
That's
local
a
mall.
sponsorship I need in my life.
Listen, it's been hard. I've had a falling out with the local Annie Ann's, so I'm.
Oh,
It's a new corporate owners, and so they forced out all the people who were working there, and the pretzels aren't the same, and it's like they were just huge jerks to all the people that like I had gotten to know there, and so I've been eating at Susie B's, and I still kind of feel like I'm cheating on Annie Ann's. Like, it's a weird, I'm having a whole, like, on Valentine's Day, Annie Ann sent me an email, and they're like, hey, buy 1 heart-shaped pretzel, get 1 free, and I'm like, I want that, and my kids were like, nope, that's that text after you break up, where they're just trying to pull you back in. And I'm like, and they're like, you just blocked that email, Mr. Miller, and I'm like, I can't!
You've taught them well.
Oh man,
You've taught
yeah,
them well,
that's life advice is not supposed to go that way.
right? So, I think that probably wraps up our discussion on comics.
Yeah, I think now that we've like turned it
We've,
into a soft pretzel.
We put a pretzel on it,
Pod.
and
Oh god! If
anyway,
you like it, then you should have put a pretzel on it.
Oh,
Isn't that
wow.
a song?
I don't think that is.
That's my jam.
That's your jam.
It is now.
As always, you can find us online at PNE_pod on Instagram and Twitter.
You can email us at contact@podsandends.com,
And you can find us online, podsandends.com.
where you can read an excellent article about Spider-Man movies from none other than Michael Miller. Which, by the way,
Yay!
where can the good people find you on the interwebs?
I still don't know where the underscore goes, but I think it's at my _comic relief, probably.
I think that's right.
I think it is too.
If it's not, you
or,
should just get that one and link it so that it doesn't
I'll
matter.
just get them all. That's what we'll
I'm
do.
sure I have a recording of
Um,
the right one somewhere.
Yeah, it's generally Shelby who remembers that, because even though I'm on Twitter every day, I don't know that.
It's like
or
knowing
my
your own
comic
phone
relief.
number, you know? Like,
Absolutely. Or mycomicrelief.wordpress.com.
it is my _comic relief, just by the way. I looked it up.
Sweet.
Yeah, is that what I said?
Yeah,
Did I
you
say that?
nailed it.
You did it right. You know
Yay
your
for
own
me.
Twitter handle.
Yeah,
Good
we're so
job.
proud of you.
We're very proud.
It's only how many years have you been asking me this question? Since I just got it now.
2.
Yeah, 2 or more.
That's crazy.
I don't know.
Only took 2 years for me to learn
Good
it.
job.
There we
you
go.
still weren't sure, but it's all good.
Listen, don't undermine my success, Brian.
Well, once again, thank you so much for
Yeah.
being on the podcast. We will catch you guys later. Bye.